Here we go. We finally made it to Image Critique Show number 18. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Behind the Shot Critique Show series. It's kind of an extension of the normal Behind the Shot podcast, which you can find at behindtheshot.tv. I'm Steve Brazill, the host of that podcast, and all of that type of stuff. Go look it up. This is a different thing, man. We're just doing critique shows today. And before I move on, I do want to just kind of remind everybody that if you are watching this on YouTube, and if you found us on YouTube, good on you, because this has been a difficult day. We've had to literally move streams because Steve is Steve. If you are watching, that subscribe button that you see down below, because that'll just make everything a little easier. What?
I am good, but Steve, the chat is saying that your sound is gone. You thought you muted yourself, and apparently you did.
You know what? Hold on. Let me just check it. Yeah, I should be back on now. Am I back on now? Yeah, I'm back on now. Okay.
Well, that was weird.
So, well, it is what it is. So I'll be back on in just a second. I know Steve, no sound. Dawn is on. Can you guys hear me now?
Good.
Yeah, better now. I must have hit the button accidentally. So anyway, I should just start over because this has just turned into a freaking nightmare. But I'm not going to.
No, we got to keep this going.
We're keeping it going.
The ethos
so here's
of
the deal.
episode.
To everybody, again, thank you so much for, I think what it was when I was trying to hit the YouTube thing, I ended up hitting the mute button instead, probably, when I was trying to hit that right there. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Makes it a lot easier. Hit the bell, yada, yada, yada. My co-host for the critique shows, Mr. Don Komarechka. Don, how are you?
I am great. I'm gardening again. The cabin fever is lifting a little bit. I'm able to get outside, even though it's going to be crunchingly freezing cold tonight, and I'm bitter about it. The world is getting warmer and better as time goes on, and I'm happy about that. And actually picking up my camera again and going out and shooting. And so some of the images that we have to look at today kind of echo some of that enthusiasm, and it's really interesting to see what people are shooting.
Yeah, well, and joining us today is an old friend of mine, photographer extraordinaire. We'll talk more about Monica's history coming up about the midway part of the show, but Monica Royal, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Super excited to be here. It's already
She said to me, can I use a background? And I'm like, well, not everybody has green screen. They don't generally look good. She goes, I have an actual green screen. And so what does Monica do? Monica actually puts her photo behind her.
But why wouldn't you? I don't understand what I did wrong. Like, that's normal.
This is awesome. I absolutely love this. And before we start on the first shot, again, and thanks to everybody, somebody made a comment. I didn't know this was a comedy. It's become that. But I have to just tell the story really quick of how I know Monica. So the whole impetus for this show was doing judging for image competitions. And what happened was a friend of mine, Troy Miller, who was our first guest on this when we started having guests on the critique show. Troy said to me one time, Steve, I'm going to San Diego to do some judging. Do you want to do judging too? They need a judge. And I'm like, sure, why not? I'll fake it. We go down there, and the moderator for that panel for professional photographers of San Diego was Monica Royal. And she made me feel so comfortable. She was a wonderful moderator. And I got addicted to being a judge at image competitions. I literally love doing it. And 4 or 5 years ago, I had the idea to turn this into a show, and that's where we're at now. So to Monica, you're kind of partially responsible for this.
Hey, Steve,
so does that mean you're
just went dead on the stream. Sorry.
What went dead?
I'm seeing some OBS camera failure stuff on your 3-up that had us all there now.
Does it seem okay now?
No.
I can't see you.
I'm not. So you don't see me at all?
I see like this weird aperture type symbol, which I think is OBS, and then there's no camera live because that's what today wants to give us.
That's really bizarre. I think it's only in Zoom. So let me do this. Hold on.
People are saying it looks good to everybody except for us. So it's
no, it's on the stream. So I'm just going to change you. and I'm just going to do
No,
this for you.
it's fine. It died for me and Monica in Zoom.
Yeah. Can't see you.
Yeah, that's so you can't see anything then coming back. All right, that's easy to
But
fix.
everybody else online
There,
you
now
are.
you should see
Now
me.
you're back. Yeah, now
Okay,
you're
you
back.
won't see the images or anything, but you'll see me.
We have them
Wow.
ourselves. Don't overcomplicate
Okay.
things. And I'm scaring the
Good
audience
time.
now, and I don't even intend to. Sorry.
This
and I
is the
interrupted
most
Monica.
bizarre time I've ever had doing this. And in some ways I love it, but I apologize to the audience for the technical issues. Let's dive in and get into some shots. And Monica, we probably should have mentioned it to you, but we usually have the guest go first. So let's jump into our first image. And normally at this point, I would tell you how, if you want to get your images in on this, you do. I'll do it at the break because we're so far behind at this point. This is going to be Monica first, and this one is called Corner Glass. What do you got?
Okay. Oh, I don't see it. It doesn't come up, right?
You'll need to have it on your
images on your end.
And how will I do that? Even though I remember this image very well.
I had sent you the links yesterday.
Yeah, that's fine. Do I just go through and click on them?
Yes.
Yeah, just open those links.
Fit.
Oh, because it's Flickr. Wow. While I do that, I distinctly remember this image. And, you know, in preparation, of course, I looked at them all last night, blew them all up and had a look. And when I saw this image, I laughed.
Did you get it up okay?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Sure did. But just not at the same time. Okay. That's okay.
There we
Doesn't
go.
matter. I can see it on my other screen. Okay, so there was a story about San Diego. There was an image that came up in a competition. There's a reason I'm telling this story. I'll make it very short. There was an image that came up, and it was a boudoir image that Brandy Pellegrino had photographed. It was exquisite. It was soft, and the woman had her hands up, and it was just silhouette, and it was so delicious and gorgeous and sexy. And the judges went crazy, and they gave it a big high score. And then Kevin Connors, who you know, Steve, leans in and says, maybe I'm missing something, but don't you see a red dot? Zoomed in, sure enough, it looked like just an absent, like a brush stroke that was a dot that had just been some mistake. And so, of course, you can't score that very high. And the reason it reminded me of that story is because when I blew this up and looked at it last night, you know, I was sitting back and I was like, I love the symmetry. I love the fact that it's a reflection and it's a play on that. I think that's so interesting. And then I noticed the fan.
Yep.
And now
I love the fan and I hate the fan.
I can't get past it. I don't want to see a part of reality in an abstract image. I just want to, I mean, you look at this and your brain processes, yeah, it's a building. And that's as far as I want my reality to go. Then I want to digest this piece as a fantastic abstract with two different sides, the light lines on the left, the dark lines on the right, but converging together. And I love it. But I would rather it not have the fan. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. You guys should have my camera back, by the way, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And I just circled the fan on there. Don, you go next. I'll let you go next, actually.
So, I mean, I interluded that I love and I hate the fan. I noticed the fan. But as soon as I noticed the fan, it makes me mentally wander around the frame to see what else I can notice. Now, I can't notice anything on the right side of the image, but on the left, I can see some blinds in the lower part, what looks like some part of a filing cabinet and maybe a light a little bit further to the left. And so those little bits and pieces that I'm seeing in the image, you're right. Monica said, you know, you shouldn't notice those little things, especially if they're so inconsequential, like the little bits and pieces of geometry that don't really matter. But the fan still stands out to me. And it's like the fan becomes the image. Whether or not the person intended for that to be it, like the flaw Monica was talking about in a previous image in a critique, that embodies the entirety of what the image is about. And the longer I stare at this image, the more this image becomes all about that fan sitting on a desk. And how do you possibly accentuate that? Maybe you don't. maybe you just keep staring at this image and you keep noticing that fan and slowly lose your sanity. Maybe the image is capable of doing that. But yes, you have that desk fan. And now that's all I can notice about this image.
I know.
And
Yeah.
that is the subject.
And here's the thing. Okay, first of all, let me start here. I love the contrast that's in this image. I love the color and the patterning and symmetry that's in this image. Jane had said that they can't see the fan, so I circled it and put an arrow on it a second ago, which is a new thing I'm kind of playing with. Hopefully it works and you guys like it. But the fact that the frames are uniformly brighter on the left, right center at the corner of the building, they changed to dark on the right, the frames around the glass.
Perfect
I like
symmetry
that.
too.
The vertical lines are all vertical.
Yes.
I noticed the fan. The fan bothered me a little bit, but what really bothered me is the horizontal lines, or, angled lines coming off center, are not even on the left and right side. So if you look at, for example, I'm going to try and mark it, but if you look at this bottom line right here, and it goes down and down that way, that right there is not symmetrical on the right side and the left side of the frame. The right side is higher. And that skewing actually kind of takes me out of the beauty and symmetry of the picture. I wish that
Steve,
you had taken the time.
I want to interject here because I was feeling that the symmetry on the edges of the frame was perfect. And I think Drake, he put his watermark on the image so I can mention his name.
Right.
I think he might have paid careful attention to the edges of the frame, as I would have as well, especially the top left and right and the very bottom left and right. Those lines in those areas, the distance between the line and the bottom of the frame or the top of the frame in each instance is perfect. And so I like that.
But it doesn't line up to the ones on the right side of the frame. If you draw a straight line across the frame, where they exit the frame on the right is higher.
Really?
Right.
I pulled it up and I did that. And yeah, they were not even. If you look, to me, they weren't even. Maybe I measured it wrong, but I pulled a line across them and they weren't. So anyway.
Anyhow, the lines don't matter, Steve. It's all about the fan.
Well, and it's all about the fan. And bringing up the fan, let me just say, when I first saw the fan, I thought, oh, it's cool. You see all these clouds, but there's a little bit of humanity in it. And I actually liked it the first time I saw it. The more that I see it now, yeah, it's really a picture of a fan surrounded by clouds. And that's, yeah.
Someone needs to break
all
into
I
that
get
office
to
building
on this.
and then spray paint the fan orange, bright neon orange, and take the photograph again because it's all about the fan.
I just have to say this because this is going to sum up episode number 18 is what Andy put here. Andy said, I've been enjoying this. Somebody said, I think I need 2 drinks. And Andy said, I've been enjoying it. Somehow it reminds me of an episode of The Muppet Show where everything backstage is kind of cursed. And yes, that is absolutely true. This one from Terrell is interesting, and that is, you guys should see some of my architectural plans I have to review. This building got built anyway. I think this picture is awesome. I'm not saying I wouldn't print it and frame it. I just think there are some areas in this picture I think could have possibly been done a little better. Don, you want to start on the next one? This one is called Common. Is it Whitlowgrass?
That's what it looks like to me. And I'm assuming that is the name of the plant that is in focus. And so this is a tricky one for me because there's a lot going on. And we have to kind of dissect some of these different ingredients. Number one, obviously the flower is the subject. But you have a lot of things around it that don't necessarily support it. Yes, it's the brightest part of the image, and that's great. So your eyes go right to the flower. And so you've got that strong connection. But there are things that pull you away, especially some brightness at the very bottom of the frame, just right of center, and some areas of strong focus in the bottom left-hand side, just a tiny little bit down in that area, a little blade of grass kind of comes back into focus. So those little things around the edges are pulling you away from the prize. But there's also the line of, I'm guessing it's just a horizontal or nearly horizontal blade of grass that's kind of going right in behind, that is a lighter gray color than the majority of the background in this particular image. And that, I know with macro photography, a lot of what we do is background control. And so, being able to replace, modify, light, control the background in some way is an advantage for images like this. And if you have something that visually, when out of focus, and we're just looking at lines and shapes and colors at that point, is a distraction, it's very easy to just kind of pat your hand down on the background to knock some stuff away, or to move things in a way that's more pleasing for the subject. And I would say that one line that intersects just below that main flower, you could have in camera done some level of just scene coordination and manipulation in order to make this image that much better. And I don't think that ruins nature. Bending a blade of grass here and there or otherwise, I think is allowed, at least in my rule book. And I would have done that. Maybe even because the plant and all of the lines that lead from that main central flower are vertical, this image could have been a vertical shot as well.
So I see, you just took that last bit you said is exactly what I had in my head. I see this vertical. There is nothing on the right-hand side, especially that bright coming through the frame all the way behind the subject flower. There's nothing on that right-hand side to me that's adding anything. And in fact, what it's doing is putting our subject right dead center in the frame, which I'd rather not see. I will say this, the idea of this type of a shot, this type of macro shot in black and white, I love. I always see macro in color most of the time, and it's kind of a neat change to see this in black and white. Part of the problem that I'm having is two things. One, the depth of field to me is just way too shallow. I mean, there is so much going on in this image, and that shallow depth of field makes me hunt for what the subject is that's in focus in a way, even though I know in my head it's going to be that thing in the middle. And part of the problem, I think, is the contrast. This image contrast was pumped up globally. And so you've got these little seed pods in the front that are almost black. You've got the bright, bright white behind the subject. And what it's doing is it's accentuating all the lines. Like look in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can see this cross pattern, almost a weaving pattern. And the contrast is accentuating that. And it's making it difficult for me to just enjoy the flower because I'm seeing when I say noise, I don't mean camera noise. The noise in the image for my eyes that are pulling me out of what I want to see. I think if you cut the contrast down or didn't do it globally and did it selectively, you'd cut those distractions out of the back. And again, losing some on the right and the top, about half of the top, would also get the subject off center. I think that would make it stronger. What say you, Miss Monica?
What's left to say? You guys hit on all the goods and all the could be betters. So I guess the thing I would add is, for me, when I make macro images outside, I have a very distinctive step, and it is go out, find something, fall in love with the subject matter, and then kill my excitement for a second and go, wait, background, like background analysis, and do that, and then go back and love the subject and photograph the subject. So I guess the only thing I would say that is slightly different than what the gentlemen here have said is that when you have images when you have subject matter that is the same scale, that is out of focus, and it is the same scale as the subject matter that's in focus, they argue with one another. So I'm much less understanding about a shallow depth of field when the other three buds are going to be smaller in scale. So I most likely behind the plane of focus where the flower is that's in focus. But not only are they very out of focus, they're on the same plane and they're the same scale. So there's just too much real estate surrounding what you want us to look at. And in the end, it just becomes a distraction.
Yeah, I completely agree on the real estate. That's a good way to put it. Is This is the 50,000 foot instead of 10,000 foot helicopter view. Let's jump into this one. This one is called The Crossing, and I'll go first on this one. And let me just start with, I'm a sucker for the black and white landscape. I'm a sucker for the infrared
You put a good
type
number
landscape.
of black and white images in this episode, Steve. I'm curious why.
Say that again?
Yeah, there's at least 3 black and white images. I'm kind of foreshadowing as I looked ahead.
Right.
But normally we don't have that many. I'm just curious. Are you in a black and white mood this week?
No, it's not so much my mood as just there were, when I go through the pool, I tend to look for images, either if I do or sometimes Dawn picks the images. When I go through the pool, I tend to look for images that I think are there and can be elevated and have, it's not so much, I don't want to call it issues. That's not the phrase, but there are, it's like spell checking in a way. I see images and think, man, if this just had XYZ, it would elevate this very quickly. And I look for images that have those kind of things, those points that I think can help the majority of people. And that's kind of where this one comes in. In this type of a scene, you've got what I want. You've got a midground, the bridge, you've got the background water, which is really nice. You've got staggered trees, you've got layering going on, which I absolutely love in this type of a scene. But there are some issues with it. So this is something I see in this kind of a shot a lot. If you look on the hill in the back, there's white speckles. Easy to fix, easy to take out, and you'll see them throughout the image. I think this image is over sharpened. And that's one of the big things is when you've got this much foliage, and I don't know if you were trying to get the bridge really sharp to stand out, but in doing a global sharpening, the leaves, and especially like the highlighted plants in the front right, they get this over sharpened artifact look. And I'd try and avoid that. If you need to, take an adjustment brush and sharpen the bridge. But other than that, I would kind of avoid the global sharpening too much, beyond a certain point. There's also something weird with the tree on the left. So if you look at the tree that's in the foreground on the left, the right side of the branches and leaves all look normal contrast that fit the scene. The trunk of the tree is hazy and gray and faded, and I'm not sure what happened there. I don't know if somehow you blew it out, because there is a lot of bright highlights in this. You tried to recover it. I'm not sure if it's a post-processing miss, but that immediately leaped at me as, if you're going to process it a certain way, you can't miss spots, right? The last thing I'll say is I don't think you need the bottom inch of the shot. Bring it on the bottom right, crop up to where the path starts, using the bottom right as the reference point, and I think it would be a stronger image at that point. Monica, what do you got?
Well, I'm glad you went technical. I could have predicted that you were going to. So I agree with all of that. That's okay, because I have something completely crazy to say about this. I thought about this a lot last. So first of all, to argue with your 1 inch on the bottom, I kind of like that there's that subtle S curve that comes in there and kind of leads you to the bridge. So I kind of dig that. I would, if you have to take some off, I take some off the top. And I also feel like, the background, it looks like there might be another body of water in there. And then, so you have, it is great layer, but then you have like this dark, if it's water, and then a light above it. So right. I would alter that a little bit and equalize the tonal value. And yes to everything you said, but I want to talk for a second about story. So I'm going to say something and you're going to have a reaction. Imagine on the left side of the bridge, where it's bright, there was a 3-year-old alone. You would look at this image and go, oh my God, right?
Right.
You'd have a strong reaction to the story. Now, if there was a dog or horse, okay, you'd have a different reaction. But as a photographer, you have the option of really creating an experience for your viewer that is going to be either or somewhere in between. And while I like this, am I going to remember this in a year? I'm not sure.
Right.
But you have the possibility and the power by choosing what you include, even in a landscape. Now, I know you're not going to sit there and wait for a wayward lost child to cross the bridge. You're probably going to be waiting a while. But I'm just using that to illustrate my point that if you choose to include certain elements, you're going to make a more memorable image. Because I don't know what the story is for this photographer. Why did they make this image? Why is this important enough for them to put on Flickr? I want to know that. I want the depth of it.
Right. Yeah. Don, what do you got?
Well, as the father of a 4-year-old, I could easily requisition her to enter into the frame had I been the photographer in this case. So, I totally agree. And I could ask her, point at one of those dust specks in the sky, and she'd be pointing, and it would make a fantastic image. But to your point, Steve, about the tree on the left-hand side, there is a very, very strong overexposed reflection, I'm assuming on the surface of water, right behind the tree. And that is so bright, it's probably enveloping as a sense of, or a type of flare around the part of the trunk that is in the immediate vicinity, and it's brightening that up as part of it. It's lowering the contrast as flare typically does. But it's being more visible than usual because the top part of the frame, the bark has been artificially darkened. And so that changes the perspective of things. So those two things are kind of playing, at odds with each other here to make that tree a bit weird. But everybody's points about the crop and changing this and that in post, I don't disagree with. But if the camera was a little higher, so if you were on a tripod, well, actually hold the tripod legs together and lift it way up above your head kind of thing. And angle the camera down a little bit, because we have a break in the path. And so you've got this path that's mowed in the grass, but it's broken. You can see the path, but then it's broken by the time it gets to the bridge. And then the path continues on the other side, but you don't really see it aside from a shadow. If the camera was higher, then you would see that path consistent and unbroken, and you would have less on the top of the frame. I think Monica said that might be useful as well, and I agree. You would also see more of the waterway as part of the process, and just envisioning that scene with an unbroken zigzag path all the way across the scene with all of the other visual ingredients at play, I think would be great. And add the 4-year-old in your set.
Yeah, add
or
the
a
4-year-old.
cow. Somebody suggested a cow. Putting a cow.
And I was just going to pull that up because
cow.
there's a couple of good comments. First of all, we've got somebody needs to be fishing off the bridge. I like that idea. Could be the 4-year-old. You never know. But yes. Wrong one. I'm going to start drinking for you. Yeah, the cow. I think a cow or something on the bridge. I don't actually personally. I don't know that I agree with higher. I kind of like the fact that there's that Gestalt, theory idea of, I know that road is continuing and continues to the bridge. I don't mind that. I do agree with Monica, though, that there needs to be something in here story-wise. I just don't know what. If it was a 4-year-old,
I think it could be many things, because you could go high creep factor. You could have someone peeking out from under the bridge, or you could go cute
that would
factor.
be interesting. A troll.
Right? You would
a
never
cow,
forget this image.
Under the bridge.
See, you would never forget this image. You'd be like, remember that time in episode 18 and that person put in that bridge and the cow was under it? Wasn't that crazy?
That's it. That
would be memorable.
Monica, you're up for this one, and it is called Discussion in Israel.
Okay. Let's talk about a few things. When you title an image, that's your opportunity to set the viewer up to have a certain kind of experience. So I read all the titles because they came to me in an email. I read the titles and I went, for a second, and then clicked on the image. Now, when the image comes up, if it matches what I conjured and makes sense, then it's kind of a restful experience. You're like, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. If it's super wacko bizarre, like if this was called, birdies, you'd go, what? And that is a very distracting process. So this makes sense, sort of. It doesn't look like a discussion to me. So in my head, when I read that, I was like, okay, I'm going to see, something that's intellectual and studious, just something that would have those characteristics. And when this came up, I thought it looks more like an animated kind of, I don't even know what, but it didn't strike me as discussion. That's a very small point. And it doesn't make or break this image, but just understand in general that titling is very, very powerful. So as we analyze this photographically, the expressions are great. They are definitely involved with each other. Technically, I don't love, let's go back to background. I don't love that dark, whatever it is, line of something in the upper left, because a hard graphic shape like that in a background is, especially on a light background, is typically very distracting. The thing I don't like the most is the plastic bag, because ask yourself, it's like story. I'm just always about story. Why does he have the plastic bag? What does it have to do with the conversation or this discussion that they're having? And the way they are physically interacting, it would appear that the bag has nothing with anything. It's not like he's gesturing to the bag or holding something up and being like, oh, look, there's a 3-year-old in the bag. That's not happening. And so I asked myself, why the bag? It's not a beautiful thing and it doesn't look related. So I realized this is a photojournalistic image. And perhaps something was going on in that scene that made it more interesting to you. I just wonder if you'd stood there longer and photographed more, you might end up with a composition that maybe doesn't include that bag, because I just don't think it adds to the story.
Don, what do you got?
Yeah, great points about the bag. Looks like there's bread in it, maybe. And so if you can tell what the subject is without really straining your mind, then it might be a more meaningful element within the shot. But I find myself really strained to do that. And when I start straining, I see that man is also holding what at first I thought was a key fob to a car. And then I realized, no, those are buttons. Those are keys on like a BlackBerry style full keyboard phone in his hand. And I'm thinking, that's a juxtaposition, right? That would be so cool, because you have these people that are, very cultured in history with all of their attire, which is one of the reasons why the plastic bag kind of stands out as something different, as too does the galvanized metal in the background that's running right between the people all the way up through the frame, which I think is weird. And if I were to have framed the image, I would have taken a step just to the right to avoid that pipe being right in between the break in the bodies and the trench coats. So, but the phone in the hand, my mind keeps going back to this phone in that guy's hand. It's like, I can barely see it, but it's one of those little things, because it's all about the hand gestures that he's making, and your eyes go right to the hands, and he's got the phone, he's got the bag, he's making some symbol, he's measuring the size of something, or he's talking about a very salient point. He's making that gesture, and that everybody's looking at his eyes and that moment, and that's great. But everything surrounding that has to embody it photographically. And if you were to see this scene, you're also hearing the scene. And there was probably sound. Maybe it was an argument. I'm not sure. As they say, discussion. But I don't know what the topic is. And so my mind just keeps going all around to what the different things in the scene are to possibly figure out what they're talking about. And I can't figure it out. And so I just keep looking, and I still can't figure it out. So that's where it kind of breaks down a little bit for me.
And at the same time, though, I've got so many places to go based on what you guys said. First of all, I like it when street photography makes me want to hear what they're saying. And so on the good side, you've intrigued me, right? You created a scenario where I'm dying to know what the two little fingers up to the mouth are doing. What is he saying? What's the discussion here? It's a moment that's curious, right? Is a good way to do it. I'm going to start with the technical. It needs room to breathe. The title actually says recropped, and I'm wondering what you cropped it from, because this is way too tight for me. I want this to breathe. I want to hear the conversation, and I want to be on a sidewalk with them, not in a phone booth with them. Camera angle. I feel like the camera angle, maybe you were sitting down trying to sneak a street shot, but the camera angle being at a child's height is actually uncomfortable for me. I don't even know why. It was. As soon as I saw it, I thought, why am I not eye level with these gentlemen? It just felt weird. But here's the thing. What Monica said about the titling, there's a couple of interesting comments that I want to bring up here. First of all, Anders brought up the man in the middle looks so angry. And I completely agree. He does. Yeah. But what's the other one in here? Okay, Malcolm. How important is it that the caption really tell what's going on? Can you just make something up to make a good caption? Yes and no is the answer to that. It really, really depends. And here's why. I mean, yes, how many times on Twitter do we see somebody post a picture now and say, caption this? And that's a fun game. That's different than when you're posting a picture trying to express your photographic eye and artisticness. Your picture needs to say something to the viewer, unless it's just a game.
I've just thought of the perfect name for this image.
What's
if
that?
This image was titled "The Cat's Out of the Bag," I would love it.
Oh, I like that. And actually, somebody else made the comment that it could be called "The Angry Discussion." That's an interesting one. Someone else, and I like this one, this is Jane, made the comment it could be called, quote, "We were this close to getting away with it." I mean, there's lots of fun things that you could play with here, and I kind of wish that you had. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. Next image. Good
discussion, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it is a discussion. The guy in the middle, his facial expression is worth $1 million. That to me was a title opportunity missed. So, Don, you want to go first on Kestrel?
Yes, well, it is an aptly titled image, if this indeed is a Kestrel. And so I love bird photography, partly because it's so approachable and accessible to just about everyone. And you're always going to have different species in wherever you are in the world. And what you might find ordinary wherever you are is exotic to me. But the background really needs to support the subject. And I know I mentioned this about macro photography, but the background is a lawn. I mean, or it's a field of grass that will be cut down for animal feed or something, but it's non-natural. It's sort of man-made, manicured in a way. It looks like it's long grass. Somebody needs to cut their lawn or something, but my mind keeps going to the lawn. The bird is perfectly in focus. There's a beautiful catchlight in the eyes. And there's a little bit of blur in the wings, which gives a sense of motion and movement within the frame, which I really like. But it's framed around an overgrown lawn, and I just can't get myself past that one thing. The bird is awesome. And it's framed very well. I might have taken a little bit further off of the right-hand side of the frame to give the bird a little bit more room to move towards the left-hand side because it's pretty evenly spaced within the frame. You want to have a bit more negative space in the direction of movement. But as soon as I look at that bird and look where it's flying, I go back to the lawn and I just keep looking at the lawn, and that's where I end up. But I don't mind the image, the concept, the execution, everything from a technical perspective. If you are trying to photograph a bird, whether it is a songbird, a bird of prey, it doesn't really matter. You know that bird is probably going to be in the general vicinity and is not just going to be in one very specific location. So choose that location around you. Choose where you're going to be setting up and hunkering down to make the image. And so many bird photographers do this. They'll even make stages for the birds. I'm not saying you'll have to go that far, but pay very careful attention to what that background is, where you will be framing that creature, because that is going to be the biggest success or failure within an image like this.
So everything Don said, I'm going to have very little to add here, although Anders asked, could we focus and zoom in on the eye, which I'll do for you in a minute here, because the eye is sharp, by the way. The eye, in fact, is nice and sharp. What I love about this image, actually, is something I don't think most people would consciously notice. It's kind of like bass in a band. You know when it's not there, but if you hear it, you know it's yes, because, lead on bass. But here's the thing. When I say yes, I mean the band yes. So it's not over-processed. You didn't over-sharpen. You didn't overcook it. You didn't do what I see a lot of people do, and that is try and just eke every little bit of color out of it with the vibrance slider. It's like, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I wish it was off-center.
I would interject one thing, though, Steve.
What's that?
I'd bet $10 that something was cloned out of the upper left-hand corner.
Really?
Mm.
Yep. The bokeh pattern in the background is repetitious.
Don't challenge Don on these things. He's crazy
No, I know.
technical. Yeah, I see it now.
I'm not seeing what you're. Oh yeah, I do up in the corner right here. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's the eye.
Where the name is. Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay, but either way, still from a processing point of view with contrast and sliders, etc. I don't think you overdid it. I appreciate the gentle hand that you took on a lot of it. I wish it was off center, right? I wish that it would move frame right so that it had nose room to fly into. I also personally, and this is going to be a kind of a weird comment here based on what I just said about the processing, but the edge of the wing that's on frame left, the very edge of it is clipped. And to me, if you had underexposed this, you would have been able to bring the bird back but save those highlights. And here's the cool thing. You would have been able to leave the grass darker. The grass is too bright and distracting. Had you underexposed it, even just half a stop more, the grass to me would have been more inviting. You could have brought the shadows back and highlights back selectively on the bird. I think it would have made a stronger image at that point. And if you're going to leave it like this, I'd probably throw a slight vignette on it, something like that. But otherwise, nice capture. You should be proud of the capture. Monica, what do you got?
Yes, all of that. I think time of day. All that technical stuff, yes, you could fix it up.
Hold on. Can I interrupt you? Because this one you may want to comment on during your review. Gary said, perhaps if the bird was carrying a fan. So I just thought I'd throw that out there in case for some reason that triggered something.
Or a cow.
Or a cow. Or a 4-year-old.
That's Kestrel carries 4-year-old away. With wildlife, it is extremely important that the eye is sharp. Yes. And to have a catch light in the eye is absolutely the icing on the cake. The problem with this kind of review situation is we don't know who we're talking to, right? The three of us, we photographed for a day and a half in our life. But if this is someone who's picked up a camera year one, oh, they're so jazzed at this image because it's sharp in the eye. It has a slight movement of the wings. It's lovely. But if you're someone who's been photographing for a little bit of time, then we apply the standards that we are applying, which is everything that's been said. And my addition is, what's the story? So the bird is flying. Great. And it's sharp. And it's a pretty bird. Great. That's the end of the story. Like every image has a visual story, right? It has a visual read to it. And so this comes up, you go, bird, sharp, next. That's how fast the visual read is. So having more data, more information, more elements in an image. Now, sometimes you can go too far, like we just talked about the bag in the previous image that we weren't crazy about, but this one doesn't have enough in it. It has a great bird in flight, solid capture for someone starting out, because it is tough to do. But if that is you that I'm speaking to, go back, find this bird, choose a different time of day, not high noon, because you can see the shadows. Stay with this bird, spend days and days. And there is nothing really wrong about, well, it's controversial, I suppose, but if you go to bird workshops, the big ones, they do things like planting prey, like feeding and stuff like that. That's a whole other topic, but try to capture your wildlife doing something. It'll set your images apart from everyone else who got lucky.
I got a question for you guys that Scott Shaw just posted. Would you be okay if they flipped the bird so that it was going left to right, or are you okay with it going right to left? And that's actually more interesting than some people would think to me, because we think, those of us that read left to right languages, we tend to think from left to right as opposed to right to left. To me, I actually like it going right to left. Again, I wish that it was farther right on the frame. Any opinion on that, you guys?
Can birds fly in the opposite direction? Yes.
No.
Are
Well, it
birds
depends whether
symmetrical?
they're north or
Yes.
south of the equator.
Yeah. So I think that it doesn't hurt the documentary value entirely. I will say that if it is something to be published in a photojournalistic area, the fact that things have been cloned out of the image already disqualifies it from that. So if you're willing to go that far, then flipping the image is also right in that same wheelhouse.
Okay. Monica, anything to add on that?
I mean, the direction doesn't bother me so much. It's funny. Dawn was making a joke, I think, about do birds fly in different directions? I mean, they do. So my brain was like, okay, but if we're going down that kind of road, I would rather see a picture of a bird with the wings up in flight all day long, because psychologically it feels more positive, and it conveys a message of literally uplifting, and so elevating. And typically when the bird wings are down, it's down. It has more of a feeling of, I'm not gonna say depressed, but it's slightly more negative psychologically than wings up.
That's an interesting point. And there's some great comments in here. And that is, John Brown said, all that said, let me pull it up actually, said, all that said, kestrels are not easy to shoot. And Matthew said they're one of the quickest and hardest to get. Of course, Terry said with a camera. And Anders said would have loved to have gotten that picture. And so let's be clear here. Look, if this is your shot, props to you. I probably couldn't have gotten this. So, but the thing is, once you capture the picture, how that picture is processed, presented, composed, that's where your eye comes in and your vision comes in and your art comes in. So look, if you got this, this is an awesome capture, sharp, love what you did. We're talking really about ways to then next time you go take it, elevate it to, a different level at that point. So quick break, and then we got 4 more images to do, but I want to talk to you guys really quick. And let's start with my friend Monica. I told the story of how we met at PPSDC, Professional Photographers of San Diego County. And in many ways, you and my buddy Troy Miller are responsible for me wanting to do a show like this, because in an image comp situation, we're limited, right? We score an image, and then one of the 3 judges gets to say like 30 seconds, and that's it. And I firmly believe that kind of feedback is one of the best ways, this kind of feedback, what we're doing, is one of the best ways to improve your photographic skill the fastest, is getting feedback that actually means something to you. So,
for sure.
Honor to have you here, Monica. Absolutely love it. For those that don't know Monica, award-winning fine art and macro photographer is what you're mostly known for. Are you still sponsored by Tamron and Miller's? Okay. And you recently did some stuff with Platypod too.
I did, which is good because I'm far older than you would imagine. And so Platypod is allowing me to get down where my creaky old bones won't allow me to go anymore. I can't lay on my stomach anymore outside and shoot up. I kind of don't want to anyway. But I am enjoying using this little contraption because it gets low. And now that I've gone mirrorless with the Canon R and the flip screen, it's a really fun way to shoot. I'm not in so much pain. So yeah, I really like it a lot.
And what else do you have going on as far as, now that hopefully the world starts getting back to normal? What do you got going on people need to watch out for?
Well, I tried to spend most of the pandemic doing crazy macro stuff that I have never done before. And I got really down. We took it very seriously. My family, my girlfriend and I, we were afraid. So we really hunkered down, and it got me depressed. So I thought, well, what do I need to do to kind of get out of this? And for me, macro can't be work. And even though it's my job, sometimes it gets to be work. And so my goal was to go into the studio and just do things that were pure play. So I did a whole series with just bending paper clips and being weird and photographing unapologetically and just, making images of glass and using my droplets and stuff and just trying to have some playtime. And I think that's what makes the best art.
I totally agree with you. When it's not work, when it's fun. Well, again,
yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. I should have had you on sooner. We need to have you on again too.
Okay. You know why I'm here? Because
why?
I said, because Don and I were on the phone recently and he's like, how are you doing? Like, mentally, emotionally. I was like, meh. And then I was like, how are you doing? And we talked and I said, the thing I miss the most is having intelligent people to talk about art with, because I love my family, but my kids and my partner, they don't, it's not the same, right? So this kind of thing that we're doing to me is stimulating and exciting. And he said, oh, well, I have a show with Steve. I'm like, Steve? Because we hadn't talked in a while. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't. So I'm extremely excited. I know all guests have to say that, but the truth is I want to be a regular because I'm just I left my family. They're on vacation. I legit stayed home.
I didn't know you knew Dawn. That's the strange thing.
Well, I know, but I didn't know you knew Dawn.
When we realized that we both knew you, I'm like, I've got stories with Monica at Denny's at 1 o'clock in the morning, for God's sake. Yeah, so fun. So Dawn, speaking of Dawn, the one and only Dawn, I usually describe Dawn in a number of different ways, mad scientist being one of them. Dawn to me is the quintessential genius photographer. And I'm not saying that, Dawn, to make you blush or anything. I really honestly respect what you do and how you do it. Like more than it's even possible to put into words. I'm not that great with words. So with that in mind, a couple things I got to say about Dawn. If you don't know Dawn, dawncom.ca, skycrystals.ca, but he does the Photo Geek Weekly podcast, Inside the Lens podcast, stuff for DP Review. Anything else you want to let us know about Dawn?
Well, my upcoming macro photography book, which you can pre-order at skycrystals.ca, as you mentioned, and that's off to the press. It's out of my hands now. I'm just waiting for a massive delivery of 5,000 copies of the hardcover book that I'm sure everybody will enjoy, although my opinion is biased. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm working on right now. You think about it, sort of what Monica was saying, that kind of getting that creative groove back. And I've got my studio set up. I'm doing some printing right now for some customers that have enjoyed some of my work. I'm editing the final snowflake of this winter's snowflake series, not because I don't have any more, but because I can only take so much of that a year. And so everything is kind of finding its balance and coalescing here. And I need a haircut, so maybe that's on the horizon as well.
Me too. Yeah. It's funny. I had a beard last time we did this, which I haven't had a beard in like 20 years. And when I shaved it, I've always had this little thing, and it's bright white gray. Most people can't even see it. And goofing around one day, I said I should make it blue. So my wife bought blue, and we dyed it blue. So that's my haircut now. There is one thing I have to point out. My favorite podcast is I shouldn't say this because I've got Don here, and Photo Geek Weekly is one of my favorites, and my own podcast is one of my favorites. There's a lot of favorites. But the podcast I've listened to the longest that got me wanting to do podcasting is, because I'm an IT geek from way back, is Mac Break Weekly. And I'm listening to Mac Break Weekly. I think it was this week. It might have been last week. And at the end of Mac Break Weekly, they do picks of the week. And Alex Lindsay, who you and I both kind of know, made his pick of the week your macro book.
Yeah.
Which was awesome.
And I was thrilled.
And he described it perfectly, by the way.
and he hadn't even really seen the whole lot of it at that time, just a smaller portion of it. But that book is the best thing that I have ever produced in my professional career, and I don't know how I will do better than that in the future. I made sure that it was that good, so I'm really happy about that. And also, Steve, I wanted to mention. Photo Geek Weekly. Normally, we do a live episode after this critique session. We are not doing that this week. Partly because I am just swamped with other stuff. And I have Chris Marquardt as the guest coming up on Monday that we're recording. So,
and for
that
those
one
that
won't be
don't know
live.
Chris Marquardt, Tips from the Top Floor podcast. I think he still does
That's
that.
right. He still does, and he is I don't want to say like an idol of mine. I don't put him up on a pedestal or anything, but he is definitely one of the people that I learned from when I was starting to learn photography, and it's so great that I am able to have conversations with him on my podcast at photogeekweekly.com, and that'll be coming up on Monday.
Sounds good. And he also is he's the regular photographic contributor to Leo Laporte's The Tech Guy radio show too. So yeah, Chris is a storied photographer. Look forward to that. I subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to Don's podcast if you don't already. So let's jump back into it. I'll go first on this one, and it's called Chasing Shadows. And it's funny that this kind of ended up, and it seems to be blurry. So I'm going to refresh that page really quick here. And
Flickr's been doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, there we go. Now it's sharp. Yeah, sometimes they just require a quick refresh on the pictures, and that's fine. It is what it is. So anyway, when I first saw this image, it's funny it's ending up with me commenting on it first, because I'm not going to lie, I really wanted to know, you guys, both of you, see light in a way that I don't in your photography. And I'm really curious what you're going to say about this. I will start with, again, I love the black and white. Don mentioned we've got a lot of black and whites this time around. It's not too contrasty. I love the fact that you actually kind of left the shadows on the stairs very natural. Like I can see the stain in one of the stairs. I like the angle. You're up high shooting not straight down, but at an angle, and it's a tasteful angle. 2, or B, the way you angled the steps themselves from one corner to the next corner. The title, I think, is absolutely spot on with Chasing Shadows, because stairs indicate movement, the shadows indicate movement. There's a couple of small things that as soon as I looked at it, my mind clicked onto. And that is, I can see the banister shadows on the wall. And the horizontal ones are a little bit down. The vertical ones obviously go up. But the shadows that are on the steps themselves, I wish that the ones that were going from bottom of the frame to top of the frame were actually vertical. If you rotated this image maybe 5 degrees to the right, those would be vertical and add kind of a neat element. The stairs would be a little bit more angled, and I think it would add to the symmetry. I do like the symmetry that you have between the bottom left corner and top right corner. I just wish that I saw more of the top right and less of the bottom left. There's only a little sliver on that top right. I wish those were a little more balanced, but overall, I actually really like the image. And Richard had a shot in the Flickr group too that I loved, but it had a white mat. I will say I love the gray matting that you did here. Let's see, Monica, you want to
go? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but okay. So Richard is the photographer. So Richard, you came upon this scene. What did you love? What made you make this photograph? And the reason I ask that is because if you can answer that when you're making the photograph, then I think the characteristics, what it is that you love, should be prominent and really easy for the viewer to grasp. So Richard's probably going to say, shadow play. Okay, fantastic. So what argues with that? Well, I can't get past the stain because, first of all, mentally, ew, right? That's what my brain does. It goes, ew, a stain on stairs. So I think about what it might be. And then graphically, it's a circle amongst squares and lines and rectangles. So it argues that way. But the reason I'm going to sound like a broken record is because it goes back to story. Why here? Why the stairwell? What's in it that's interesting? I get the shadows, but imagine, and pause. This is why we can't say this stuff in image comp, because you got to judge what's in front of you. What's good about a critique like this is that seasoned photographers, really old people like us, can make suggestions that might elevate the story. So imagine if you push this and in the upper left, there was just a foot exiting, or 2 feet just exiting. Or in the lower right, just the entrance of a foot starting to climb stairs, or one crazy weird hand on the stair rail that you could see entering. It would just skyrocket the interest factor, because I'm an abstract lover. So I'm going to do lines and shadow and play all day long. I love it. But I think you could push this idea a little bit farther so that the image, again, going for something that's memorable and has a long lasting kind of impression upon people.
So before we go to Don, I want to bring up a comment here, because the maker of the image, Rich, is in here, Rich Rizzo. And you said, what inspires you here? And he said, the shadows, I'm inspired by them. But it's an interesting note that you said of the feet, because then Gary came in and said, if there were a shadow of the person in the background, so even if not feet, right? If on the wall, maybe what would be cool is maybe on the wall, but somehow magically not on the stairs. A lot of ways you could go. But if you saw the shadow of a person, that might be kind of interesting. Don, what do you got?
Well, I like the fact that there's diagonal lines that on the very edge of the frame, like the upper right-hand corner, there's this tiny little black triangle that at first I didn't really like. But then I noticed it echoed a lighter triangle on the left side in the upper corner. But then you also have a small triangle in the bottom left and right corners as well. And so those triangles kind of added a nice framing element. And I kind of like that because this image is about lines and shapes and textures, which are just more minute lines and shapes. So I get that. And I like the way that the framing was chosen for that. But with any amount of lines and shapes that are somewhat repetitious, and in fact, in a lot of architecture, it is exactly that. Anything that breaks the pattern stands out. And as we've mentioned, the stain stands out. What if you had a coffee cup, just a disposable coffee cup that was discarded on the stair next to the stain? I mean, that would give the stain purpose, right?
Yes.
And maybe you have some discarded leaf litter
Monica's
or other
reaction to
things
that.
because the stairs might have been poorly kept because there's a stain. And if they're poorly kept, then there's going to be a stain. What if the person that you had described as coming in was actually someone cleaning the place up that has one of those little claws on an arm that is going to pick up the coffee cup and is reaching in and picking up the coffee cup that left the stain in this leaf litter? My point is that would give a story. And the image right now, as it is, does not have that particular story. It has no story. But that doesn't make an image bad. You know, like I photograph
Yeah, I want to
snowflakes all the
stress
time.
that. It does not make an image bad by any means.
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
snowflakes I photograph are lines and shapes, and they're mostly
Right.
monochromatic. So I mean, I get the style of the subject matter, and in such, I try to find whatever the story could possibly be. If there was no story, well, the story then falls on you. You're the photographer. And if you could be something in the image and not just documenting something, then please find some way to do that. Take your phone out of your pocket, place it on one of those stairs, and like ask a family member. It's like, okay, call my phone in 2 minutes, like mom, and have like the word mom show up on the phone screen of a discarded phone on the stairs, and build a story with those ingredients, because those are stories that you can tell without having to go anywhere or do anything. You can put yourself in the scene.
Well, and
That's
what's
a great
interesting is
idea.
what you just described is making a photo, both of you making a photo, not just taking a photo. Rich
yeah.
did say that shadow on the bottom that's interrupting the lines, that's actually him. You know, if I could see your shoulder shape and head shape, that would answer that particular scenario that we're going for here. This next image, let's go ahead and start with Monica on this one, and I'm dying to see what you say on this.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, everyone's going to hang up because I didn't know the conversation was going to go this way, right? So, oh God, it's nothing new to say. Again, when I looked at this last night, I was like, now, what if okay, let's do that in a minute. Okay, yes, it has impact, right? It's the color against the gray tones in the background. The saturation is good. It's an interesting view on a sign like this. You don't look at signs from this perspective. It looks a little distorted, which is probably your lens choice, which is cool. Again, makes it unique and different versus, most people see the world at between 5.5 and 6.5 feet, right? And so you've come down and tilted up. That's cool. But at the end of the day, it's a photograph of a type of street sign. What if there was, and I'm not a gun lover, but like a blast.
Please don't say cow.
No. What if there was a 3-year-old hanging? No. What if there was like a hole in it, like a bullet hole or something? What if there was a chunk out of the side of it? What if there was just more? Doesn't have to be morbid, but just a little bit more. That's why everyone's going to hang up now, because we sound like broken records, but it's just the way these images are presenting themselves. They're simple, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes it just requires a little bit more.
So Don, what do you got?
Yeah. I think that Monica's right. Photography is a subtractive art, right? You have to take things away from the whole universe that we have to photograph, narrowing it down to the fundamentally tiniest elements to simplify things. You can go too far because our effort is to simplify. And so it's very easy to take that one step too far in that direction and lose the scope of things. And I think that we might be there here. I mean, from my perspective, I started wandering around the image, and I had a strange moment where I put myself in the engineer of the guy that was making the sign in his mind. He wrote the letters COV 2011. Now, I mean, granted, letters COV together right now from 2020 onward are more tense for me than they would have otherwise been. But he put them inverted on both sides of the sign. Whoever the sign engineer was knew that whoever was going to be installing the sign doesn't care which way it is and is going to put it upside down half the time, and it would drive that engineer nuts. And so he put the words on either side. And if my mind is going there into all of those little intricacies, it means the image overall hasn't captured my attention, and I'm going into the design of the sign as far as my mind carries forward. I like the center nut and bolt that has some cracks in the material. That's kind of neat, and that's pulling my attention in. And the rain that is creating texture on the checker pattern of the sign, that's also very interesting. So I think that if you were to zoom in on some of those particular details, it might gather a little bit more attention because they would be more prominent in the frame. I get the moody atmosphere of this whole setup, and I like it. But I can also tell the kind of processing is a really heavy-handed, like, I don't want to call it dehaze or by any particular means, but the inner edges of the sign are darkened to a gradient towards the center that's brighter, but the outer edges of the sky that hit the edge of the sign are brighter that fade to darker as they get further away. This is a classic way of increasing contrast. And it is just exacerbated to a much, much greater degree, creating a dark halo inside and a bright halo outside that once you notice it from an editing perspective, you can't unsee. And it's there, it's dominant in the image. And I might take a bit of a lighter hand if you want to create that moody effect. Don't do a one button click option to get yourself there. Take a bit more time and attention to exactly what's happening, why certain edits make things a little bit more moody, and work with that. Work with that idea, even when you're shooting, to see how you can kind of bring that to the forefront before you get to Photoshop.
So I officially have almost nothing now. You guys. Okay, so first of all, let me start here. Andy chimed in and said it should be called Chess Nerds Crossing, which I love. When I first saw this image, I immediately thought, oh, it's a composite. Somebody took a chessboard that was some, stone, because the black and gray actually look like they have kind of a stone pattern to them, like a marbly
Steve,
pattern.
what we have to do, I have to do that. I have to find one of these signs, these whatever cautionary signs. I have to glue chess pieces to it.
Well,
this is now on my bucket list.
I really have nothing. Because that is exactly what I was going to say. When I first saw it, I thought it was a composite, and I thought, wow, he really sandwiched these two images together. He took a normal yield sign and put a chessboard on it. No, this is an actual sign according to the description. Never seen a sign like this. But if you have two roads, one road that meets another one that's normally going to be a four-way intersection, but it's a three-way, and that one road coming through does not continue beyond the intersection, you have one of these signs that says, there's no more road here, so please don't crash into a ditch or a river. In a lot of ways, it's a great idea, great sign. However, I think the crop at the top is way too loose. But the biggest thing, and Monica alluded to this, the biggest thing for me is the angle. I can feel the perspective is off, like it's subconsciously off. The center triangles are straight vertically, right across the sign. Horizontally, they're not. Right, top to bottom, the center ones up through the screws, those are vertical. Left to right, it's tilted down on one side. That bothers me. You can also see it, by the way, if you look at the screws themselves. Some of the screws look more straight on than others. I wish that you had, fixed the skewing of this a little bit. And as Don just alluded to, even if you do it in post in 3D and Photoshop, a chess piece in the right spot would be really coming out in 3D. Even if you just used earthquake stickiness and stuck it on there, would be really, really cool. The sky to me is too strong. If you look, like Don said, on the right bottom angle, it's really bright along the sign and the rest of it doesn't really match. Great concept. Please go back and do this again. And think about taking this picture to the next level that tells some bizarre story that you want to tell that's just, a little bit different out there.
Can I say one quick word about what you just said?
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm pretending that the artist is saying to you, Steve, I meant to do that with the perspective, right? Well, I got down low. Yeah, I meant to do that. But as an artist, when you make a choice to alter reality in a photograph, you need to explain why visually. Otherwise, people like these two technical guys are going to go, well, your lines are off or your perspective is distorted. And that's the end of their enjoyment or their visual read because they can't get past it.
Which may be okay.
Which may be okay, but I think if someone thinks through why they're going to alter reality and then can explain it visually, doesn't have to be a positive or a negative, but just more information to explain why you're breaking those rules, why you're making it appear that way, then it looks intentional versus presented in a way in which it just looks like a mistake.
Well, and it's the old saying of if you're going to do something, commit to it, right? Slightly off appears mistake. Yes. Radically off appears intentional.
Exactly.
One blurry image is a mistake. 10 blurry images is a style. So if you're going to do it, commit to it and make me think, oh, it's a skew, not did they miss being accurate? And it's a fine line, but it's it's a line that can be achieved. Yeah. Dawn, you want to take this one? This is called
sure. To go back
Barn.
to the previous image, Andy says, personally, I think a chess piece would be a bit on the nose. Thank you for that, Andy. But what if What if the chess pieces were arranged in such a way that it was a stalemate? Just a classic chess move, and if you know chess, you know what that stalemate position of all the pieces are going to be.
Right.
An impasse, if you will. You cannot get past that, and that I think would close the loop. I might be wrong, but let's go on to the next image, which I love.
This one is called Barn, by the way.
There is a barn, so that is a suitable name, I suppose, although it could have been a little bit more descriptive based on what the heck is happening. I mean, obviously I know that there's a drone that is flying in a semicircle around the sky here, and there's snow on the ground and there's snow in the air, so there's blizzard, and the light in the sky is showing us that atmosphere, and I like that. It's bringing this home and making me feel like, okay, well, I'm standing here in the cold. I can kind of feel the wind because I can see it in the light, and I like all that. But I don't know why this isn't a full circle. I mean, drones have, I mean, I know it's cold, but the battery is probably going to last long enough to do a full circle around this barn. But if that was the case, then it would be like totally a UFO abduction moment, which I love as an image concept. I think that would be totally fun. But if that was the case, then I need footsteps going into the barn and somebody having like lit a candle or putting a torch, like a flashlight that has a warmer color temperature inside the barn with some of that warmer light spilling out into the snow. To show that, yes, somebody has gone into this derelict building and they're about to be abducted by aliens. And the image gets me halfway towards that story, but only halfway there. And I have to kind of make it up the rest in my mind. And I think that it could have gotten that far in camera, in execution in the field.
So, wow, that just opened up. I didn't think about the light inside, and I like that. So, first of all, what a scene, right? The barn is perfect. The angle of the roof, the snow, the tree, the footsteps. I so wish that I was here to take this photo. I love this scene. I think, first of all, to me, I see this more landscape than portrait, except that you wanted to capture the cool sky lit up, and you wanted to capture the drone light, which in the description, it does say that this is done with an LED on a drone, right? But if you took out the drone, like didn't use the drone, then the barn would probably be too dark. That's okay. I like what the drone light is doing to the barn and the tree. I don't like the drone light in the sky. I would have taken a plate, I would have used the drone light, and then I would have cloned the drone light out and just had this as a really cool, almost like moonlit scene. The light inside that's a warmer color would be absolutely brilliant. But make it landscape to me, because there's a whole, even above the drone light, there's a lot of this framing that isn't helping at all. And in fact, my mind says that maybe you only left it in there to keep the horizon line on a third, but you could lose probably half of that at the top. Clone that light out, and I think you've really, really got a shot here. And last thing, there is, under the drone light, dead center. So if you look at the curve, let me see if I can find it, because I'm just drawing on a green screen here, but I think it's about right there. No, I missed. Just above that. It's about right here.
A little higher.
There's a white box reflection type thing right under there, under that light. And I'm not sure what that is, but it jumped out at me that there's a little square piece of light there. Fix that as well. Monica, what do you got?
Yeah. What if?
Here we go.
I mean, so yes to everything. If I don't agree with something one of you have said, I will for sure say. So yes to, I do agree with what you've said so far. What if you did like picture this, picture coming down to snow level, use your platypod, a 1-to-3 crop ratio, but instead of using the drone to make a half shape that only makes me ask questions, not in a good way. What if the drone was behind the barn? Let's hope there's enough cracks to have that light come through. So maybe you can't access a building like this to go inside to put that warm, ghostly light. But imagine a long 1-to-3 crop ratio The building's in the left, you're down on snow level, and you use the drone to just hover behind the building and create like this ghostly effect. That could be cool because it has a ton of potential. But again, when you do something that's cool technically, maybe that many people wouldn't understand. My son flies a drone. I knew what this was. It's a cool idea, but the execution of it makes me ask questions that kill my enjoyment. So as soon as it came up, I went, oh, cool, drone snow. Why did they not complete the circle? Right? It's exactly the same thing, that first thing that Dawn said. And then, if you want to present it this way and get rid of all the storytelling stuff that we're talking about, then you got to clean up the snow, because it just looks, all of those random footprints are also distracting. This is a mysterious location and a mysterious time of day with a mysterious thing flying overhead. To have all of this human-made foot traffic, it's not doing you any favors.
A lot of those footprints are not human-made. They're animals.
Well, but I'm going to add that if you did do Dawn's idea of a warm light inside the barn, having no footprints outside makes it more mysterious. Like, how long have they been stuck inside?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other things.
Steve,
say again?
What if you have footprints that, because the roof is pretty low, at least in the angle towards the camera, it looks like the building's kind of falling apart that way.
Mm-hmm.
What if you had footprints that were going towards that low angle, and then a bit of a scuffle as somebody, you could tell based on the broken snow, climbed onto the roof, and footprints continue to go up to the peak of the roof and then disappear because the UFO abducted the guy, right? I mean, there's a lot of stories you could build into this.
There are times now that I told Andy, if you don't know, shoots, he's got Holstein cows, and he will periodically photograph the Holstein cows in different scenes, and it's awesome. The way that he does it, they look like they're really there. So I said, we really need the Holstein cows, and his comment was, whoops, I missed it. They probably feel that one UFO abduction was enough excitement for a lifetime. But part of me wonders if people are making comments just to have me bring them up. Where was Terrell's? Right here. Monica Royal. If you complete the circle, the movie is over and the credits roll, which
I know, but I didn't argue to complete the circle because that's way too cliche and done. So I get it. I wouldn't complete the circle, but except that it's a half circle and your brain processes shapes like that and wants them to be completed. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So last one. And Monica, if you want to go first on this one, which is called Fruit Fly.
Fruit Fly. Okay, let's go positive first. Sorry, as judges, when we judge a lot, we're used to just, come on, let's get to it. And we forget that, you should be nice first. So fruit flies are interesting. Look at that wing. It's mostly in focus where it's supposed to be, I think. It looks like, as I zoom it in with my glasses on, it actually looks like the body is a little bit sharper than the eye. And typically, unless there's a reason, we want the eye on any living creature, including this yucky one, to be sharp. So there's that. The composition is good. It creates a sense of interest because it's anti-gravitational, and it causes some discomfort because as a viewer, when you see something hanging from somewhere, you are reminded that things could fall. So there's that sense of discomfort versus if it was flipped around and the insect was perched on top. That's a much more comfortable, leisurely kind of feel to it. So kudos for getting that. Your exposure on the creature is good. Where it starts to break down a little bit for me is, ultimate deal breaker. And I know the guys are freaking out because they're like, why didn't you say this first? That little twig sticking out of the frame that's from nothing, that is a deal breaker. That's like, I can't even have a conversation with you until that's gone. And then we can have a chat. Like, it's one of those, there's no room for, you can't argue, creative expression, but I really like that piece of graph. You just can't. It's like 1,000%. You cannot have that. End of story. let's move on. So, so after that extremeness about that piece, then, I mean, the, what do you call that stock, it's a little hot on the left. And I wonder if it would kind of be a little bit more pleasing if you skewed the angle to kind of intensify, put it on the 45 a little bit more, just to, well, I guess just it would be less, extreme with it's driving from the edge of the frame, right? There's just not a lot of, it's coming out of nowhere. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
Right,
and really, you've hit almost every point I've got. I'm going to reiterate a couple just because I think they are important to understand. I like it being upside down. I like that idea that we in our head think, wow, I can't do that, right? That's kind of cool. But what this comes down to me on is composition, composition, composition. There is no substitute for good composition. It's you can take, if you play bad music, strike that. If you play good music out of bad speakers, it's still going to sound bad. If you take what is objectively a great photo and compose it poorly, that's the bad speakers, right? You have to present the visuals that I'm seeing in a way that communicates the sound quality of your image. Composition, composition, composition. Get the fly off center. I totally agree. Rotate the frame so that this side goes down. Missed. This side goes down and this side goes up. Just a little bit to get that to 45 degrees on the stock that this is sitting on. Remove that little piece on the right. The depth of field. So the body is sharper than the eyes. I need the eyes in focus. And there's an old thing when you do like portraits of an animal, like a dog, we'll use a dog, that you want it sharp nose to tail or nose to ear, right? I don't mind the body being sharp and I like the wing being sharper. I wish the back wing was sharper and I really wish the eyes were sharper. Other than that, this is a great, what I love about it is you are clearly, whoever made this image, you are clearly experimenting in this world. And I think that is going to, in the long run, benefit your photography if you start taking this and going, okay, what if I do X, Y, Z? Don, what do you got?
So a couple of things here. I'm surprised nobody mentioned why is that stalk or twig broken? Right, like you've got this sheared off end of something in the frame. It could have continued on to the edge of the frame. I don't know what it is, but like the leaf or some stalk of something, and it could have been like if you like plant some vegetable seeds, just take some tomato seeds and you plant them. They make some really nice, beautiful initial leaves that have these nice little curves. You can get a fruit fly on there, and it's a much more pristine surface for them to be on. So there's an element of that. I also look at the background, and I noticed somebody was mentioning in the chat. I think Anders said, due to the depth of field for me, it looks like the legs in the back are half disappearing, but Anders, that's not entirely true. Yes, the shallow depth of field is giving a bit of that, but I think because there's a bit of a darker halo right around those really overly skinny legs in the background, it hints to me that the background's been replaced. And so the green blob that is the center of this image looks to me, it's got the hallmarks of being replaced. When you have out of focus areas where you've got a depth of field that is very shallow and they're blurry details, it's really, really hard to make a background replacement look completely natural. And I think we're seeing that here. So if you're going to be doing that, choose a complementary color. Don't choose green. You already have green in the scene. Choose purple or, magenta or something else that's, different that we don't see anywhere else. It's also worth noting that this image was taken with a smartphone. And it was taken probably by the pixel stretching that I can see on the edges of the frame with a close-up filter on top of that. So kudos to using limited technology, whatever you've got to make a great image and pushing that forward. Also very curious is the red in the wing. That's specular highlights off of a light source. And you can see that a little bit on the body, a little bit on the rear wing, but mostly on the front wing. And that means whatever light is being used to illuminate this, there's either a secondary light or a component of that first light that is starkly red. And that just makes me very curious as to why. I don't mind that as a scene, like an accent. It adds some nice color into the frame. You know, otherwise it would just be pretty monochromatic, just kind of yellows and greens without a whole lot of deviation from that. So that splash of red I like. It doesn't answer the question as to why it's there. And so I would like that to be a little bit more descriptive as to understanding what the heck it's doing in the image, knowing that it's not the wing itself, but colored from a light source that is outside of the camera's purview right now. So those are my thoughts on this one.
Wow. Interesting. Some of that I would not have gotten. And a couple of people are commented, maybe it's something that was done if it was on a smartphone in Snapseed, at which point, you know, something was missed, but very, very, very interesting. So that is our final image. Before we close out, did you have something to say, Monica?
No, I was just whining because we're done.
Oh, I know. It's so fun. And what makes it so fun, really honestly, is the people that are in here participating and chatting and commenting and doing all of that. Malcolm said, Steve, don't know if you can fix this when you archive this episode, but the YouTube description, yeah, there's a reason for that, and I will fix it, Malcolm. It mentions Andy in the description. We had issues before, and I tried to stop and restart the stream, but it closed out the video that I was doing, so I just really quickly went in and duplicated an existing one to start it, but I will fix the description very definitely. When this goes, you know, live, I'm going to trim the beginning off. So before we close out, though, Monica, where can people find you?
Well, I'm currently in my office in Southern California. Oh, you don't mean? Oh, sorry.
Or do I?
Actually, Monica Royal. The name, it's everywhere, which is awesome. Like, I mean, you can find. I'm super easy to find. I mean, like Dawn too, right? Easy name to find. So Monica Royal everywhere. You can, it's, I was going to make a stupid joke and then I censored myself. I love to hear from people. I love to do a lot of this stuff one-on-one. So if you're interested, please hit me up. That's the beauty of this pandemic. If there is a silver lining, is that the connection, I'm not going back to, you know, the limitations of being in person. So what I mean by that is obviously I'll visit people, but there's no more excuses anymore. We can all be together. We can all have conversations. We can all work together. We can do workshops online, which I do. And then private image critique and business coaching. That part of my business is exploding because of the accessibility. So, you know, if you're interested in working together, then hit me up. Let's do it.
Sounds good. And it's monicaroyal.com, at Monica Royal on Instagram. There's an underscore in the middle on Twitter, so it's at Monica_Royal. And Facebook, it's Monica Royal Photography, so go look up Monica as well. And Mr. Don Komarechka, where can people find you?
At doncom.ca, donkom.ca. Everything is linked to there. And just as a quick note, Anders was asking me in the chat to get me to use an older model camera, like 10 megapixels for some photos the next time, or in another podcast. Well, Anders, I actually have the original Canon Digital Rebel, which was, I think, 6 megapixels.
Of course you do.
And I bought it for an article that I wrote for Outdoor Photography Canada magazine when it was still in publication, about using inexpensive camera equipment to make some great gear, to make some great images with really limited gear. And the Canon MPE 65mm lens that I use quite often originally debuted in 1999, so that's about on par. And so yes, I've done that, and I have with me right here, Anders. This is a 1997 Circa camera from Panasonic. It is their first digital camera. So if you want me to use this to make something magical, You're on. It's going to happen. This was a fantastic camera for its day. I mean, if you could imagine this, it has a telescoping viewfinder. It jumps right up like that. It has a built-in ND filter that can be flipped right on. It has a fully articulating screen. Could you imagine? From 1997. Now, it takes really terrible photos. And I'm going to try to take some good photos with that. So that answers that question. And that's me with my mad
I just thought of something else that people need to go look up. I mentioned Alex Lindsay before because he had made your book the pick of the week on MacBreak Weekly, but Alex does a thing called Office Hours, one of my favorite things. I don't usually get up that early, but when I do, I'm in Office Hours because I love it. Also Monday nights. But Dawn was recently on Office Hours. It is available on YouTube. Alex Lindsay on YouTube. Talking about stereoscopic. I got up for this one, actually. Talking about stereoscopic imagery. It was a great episode, so go find that one on YouTube as well. And as always, to both of you, thank you so much for doing this. You are both so appreciated.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having us. Thanks for making this happen.
For everybody that's watching, just a quick reminder for you. First of all, also let me say this. Thank you for being so patient when we had to suddenly switch streams. I'll fix the description before hopefully most people see this. Thank you for hanging out during the technical issues that we had earlier, you know, the world being what it is. It is much, much appreciated. My name is Steve Brazill. This is Behind the Shot. You can find all the information about the podcast at behindtheshot.tv. The critique shows are there as well, but they only actually air on YouTube. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, it makes it a lot easier. Just go down, click the subscribe button, click the bell. That way, when you choose the bell, choose all. That way you know when we do a critique show, when I release a normal new episode of the podcast, which, by the way, is available wherever you get your podcasts, in video or audio format. Again, all the info at behindtheshot.tv. If you want to participate in these critique shows, after the way today started, I'm not sure why, but if you do, what you need to do is go sign up at Flickr for a Flickr account. It can be a free account or a paid account, but they can always use the help, and I love Flickr. Very few places on the planet on the internet display pictures as well as Flickr does. If you want your pictures to look good, this is not an ad, this is not a paid thing, but if you want your pictures to look good, go put them on Flickr. Join the Behind the Shot group there. Submit your images. At that point, you're just playing in the pool. If you want your images to be available for us to pick from for these critique shows, tag them with a Flickr tag, btscritique. That way we know you've kind of given your permission for us to use them for the shows. Other than that, and by the way, we're only doing one of these a month right now. So thank you again to my guests, Monica Royal, my co-host, Don Komarechka. To everybody, thank you very much for watching. This is Behind the Shot, and we will see you on the next show.